1 week pa din po. So, separate.
Okay.
Kasi
So,
para ma-discuss na rin siya next week sa discussion classes.
okay. All right. So, the problem set that will be released today is due next week. And then you'll have time to discuss the answers next discussion class, which is next Thursday. And then the second problem set, the second part of the problem set will be sent out next week naman. And then that's going to be due, reading break na, no? So it would be after the reading break na that you have to submit the answers to the second part of the problem set. Okay? All right, sige. Exciting kasi cost na to. Ewan ko, paano ako lang na-excite. Kasi masarap i-discuss yung cost functions. No? Enjoy ituro yung consumer theory kasi it's something that we can all relate to. No? We're all consumers, so madaling i-discuss kasi alam natin. But firm behavior, especially yung construction yung how to construct the supply curve, to me it's new, so it's a little fun. I don't know, baka ako lang ang natutuwa dito and you're not. Okay, so having said that, balikan natin yung ating mga slides. Magre-review tayo ng konti, no? Para lang kahit papano ay sandali lang. Para kahit papano ay maalala nyo kung ano na mga pinag-usapan natin doon sa chapter 7. Alright. Sige. Ang gusto kong i-emphasize dito ay yung itong least cost rule, no? Kasi mahalaga itong matandaan nyo. Yung least cost rule kasi ito yung condition. Pag sinabing condition, ito yung kinakailangang ma-satisfy. Nang sa ganon, yung least cost, which pertains to ano ba yung least cost na amount of labor and amount of capital that should be employed or that should be used by the firm when producing a target number of goods. So nag-uumpisa yan sa, okay, ano ba ang target na production level ng kumpanya? Let's say sinabi niya 100. That 100 now, there are different ways to produce 100 units of a good. Diba? Iba-ibang combination yan. Hindi unique ang solution sa pag-produce ng 100 units of t-shirt halimbawa, no? So when I say iba-ibang yun, pwedeng mag-employ ka ng maraming labor, konting capital, pwede din namang mag-trade off ka, magdagdag ka ng capital, bawasan mo yung labor. And then you'll still end up with 100 units of the good. Now the question is, what is the combination of, or how many laborers and how many capital should you use in order to have the least cost? Ibig sabihin yung pinaka murang production cost, no, to produce 100 units of, let's say kung t-shirt ito, t-shirt. Now, ito yung least cost rule. Ito yung sinasabi, but this is mathematical in a sense. So sinasabi niya na kapag the marginal product of labor per peso, which means that the marginal product of labor divided by the price of labor, which we call wage. All right, so it's the marginal product of labor divided by wage. That will make it the per peso marginal product. No? Tapos, if that's equal to the marginal product of capital divided by the price of capital, then you've arrived at a position ng least cost o yung pinakamababang cost. Kasi kapag ang sitwasyon ay alright, pagka ganyan ng situation, dito, the per peso marginal product is bigger than the per peso marginal product of labor. I mean, the per peso marginal product of labor is greater than the per peso marginal product of capital. Anong ibig sabihin nito? How do we interpret this? It means that it is cheaper, or it is a cheaper way to approach production would be to add more labor, because ang per peso of labor hour that you hire, that this firm hires, will give you more addition to production than a per peso capital hour. Diba? Makes sense naman. Ibig sabihin, mas cheaper mag-hire ng labor than to hire capital, and contribution ng labor to total production is bigger. And so the firm will continue to hire labor, and every time the firm hires labor, more labor, the marginal product of labor goes down because of law of diminishing marginal returns. So, kapag ka ganon, itong ano na to, itong big greater sign na to, may still hold, pero paliit na ng paliit yung difference ng difference nitong marginal per peso marginal product of labor and per peso marginal product of capital. Kasi habang the firm hires more labor, the marginal product of labor goes down, and the marginal product of capital, dahil mas konting capital naman ang hinahire, kasi hindi po pwedeng same number of capital tapos you increase the amount of labor. Pag ginawa mo yon, then lalaki na yung production mo, hindi na magiging 100, magiging mas mataas na 120 probably. So in order to maintain, siyempre ang target mo is 100 lang dahil yun lang yung budget mo eh. Yun lang yung talagang target ng company. Then kapag ka binawasan mo yung capital na unrequired na na ginagamit mo, tataas naman yung marginal product of capital again to be consistent with the law of diminishing marginal returns. Okay? So ganun yan. Yan ang mahalaga na tandaan ninyo. So may mga graphical representation lang yan. That same equation can be represented by simply this. At this point, at that point, the marginal product of is satisfied. How? How do we know that? Because if you rearrange this is just this one. Now this equation is the same as this one. But what is this? This is the slope of the isoquant, which is this one. This is the isoquant. And what is this? This is the slope of the isocost. And what is your isocost here? This one, this line. All right. So that condition, this tangency between the isocost and the isoquant is consistent with the least cost rule, which is this one. Oops. Right? Consistent siya kasi pag nire-arrange natin yan, it's just representing the slope. The slope of the curve and the line, the slopes are equal. And they're equal if there's a tangency. Okay? So yun ang kailangan yung tandaan, and to be able to appreciate, to be able to understand and appreciate. Once you do that, there's a lot of things that now will make sense to you. Okay? All right. So we ended with that topic. No? So the others would be just about opportunity cost. The difference between accounting and economics is that in accounting, you only take into consideration the costs that you actually purchased. In economics, the cost include what we call opportunity cost, which is when I work for let's say sabihin mo ay nako halimbawa artista no. Well, kung big time siyang artista na meron siyang restaurant, di ba tutuwa yung mga tao, uy, may artista dito, yung artista na may-ari, siya din yung nagwe-waiter. di ba? That only happens kapag yung artista ay walang shooting or wala siyang project at that time. Kasi yung opportunity cost niya for that day mababa or zero kasi wala naman siyang project. No? So, kung mag-work siya doon, yung opportunity cost niya for working in his own restaurant is zero kasi walang kapalit yun. No? Pero kung halimbawa he gave up, let's say a day of shooting that he could have been paid 100,000 that day dahil si Bea Alonso siya, meron siyang restaurant, may shooting sana siya that day kaso sabi niya I committed na ako ang mag-serve sa restaurant ko, no, sa kung saan man sa Quezon City, ganyan. So pagdating sa costing nung operations that day, dapat yung 100,000 pesos na finurgo ni Bea Alonso to serve as a waitress sa kanyang restaurant should be, kahit restaurant niya yun, should be counted as a cost. So ganun ang difference kasi sa accounting, since hindi siya nag-charge, zero yung labor cost. Pero sa economics, hindi. Opportunity cost kasi is 100,000. So kasama yun doon. Okay? All right. So ngayon, ipagpapatuloy naman natin yung discussion natin, and this is going to be about the analysis of perfectly competitive markets. No? So yung cost na pag-usapan na natin kung paanong ina-analyze o paanong how is a firm guided towards least cost production level. Ibig sabihin, pag say least cost, ibig sabihin the firm is trying to decide how much labor to hire, how much capital to use. Kasi to produce a specified level of output, no, in this our example 100 units nga. So ito naman sa chapter 8, if this is ito naman ang analysis natin dito is the market itself. Alright, merong iba-ibang, essentially two types of markets. Perfectly competitive market and an imperfectly competitive market. So it is the perfectly competitive market that is the gold standard. Yan yung market situation na kung saan the lowest possible price with the highest possible output are achieved. Okay? So in this chapter, we're going to delve into what we call industrial organization analysis. So pag sinabing industrial organization, from the word industrial, we're looking at industries. Kasi firms ito eh. So these are members of the industry. Pag sinabing organization, it is how the industries are organized in the market. So industrial organization refers to the general characteristic of the industry that characterizes the market. So the question is, how is the market organized? Sasabihin, ang sagot ay, it is perfectly competitive or imperfectly competitive. So that's how the industries are organized. So how the market is organized or how we characterize the firms that comprise the market is what we call industrial organization. So keep in mind that every firm's objective is profit maximization. All right. What do firms do with the profit once they earn that profit? They could pay dividends to owners, kung maraming owners. They could reinvest in the firm to form equity, or they could purchase or expand operations. So pwedeng yung profit na yon i-divide among the owners, or pwede rin namang i-reinvest sa firm to form larger equity. Kung familiar kayo sa financial operations, sa finances ng isang firm, merong tinatawag na equity. Equity is parang the amount of money, parang amount na na part ng investment doon sa firm, kasi meron siyang paano na bayaran meron siyang machines, meron siyang building, etc. Paano na bili yun? It could have been through equity or loans. Alright, so yung equity yung parang investment nung owners. So yung equity na yon, of course, kaya ganun yung laki ng equity niya kasi may expectation ng dividends, or may expectation naman ng may return sa kanya. Now, kapag kumita yung kumpanya, alright, so pwedeng i-divide yun sa owners. Yung sabihin sa mga nag-invest sa company, kung 100 yun, 100, let's say ang profit niya is 100, pwede rin namang sabihin, wag muna tayong mag-declare ng dividends, palaki na lang natin yung equity kasi may mga balak tayong bilhin, etc. No? And pwede din namang yung mga bibilhin na yon ay to expand operations. Okay. So, the first type of industrial organization we're going to look at is what we call perfect competition. What is it? This is a type of industry organization wherein there are many, we call them small firms, but they're not necessarily small na parang mom and pop size. When we say small, it just means that there's no firm is big enough to affect price. Kasi you can affect price kapag masyado kang malaki. You're bigger than the rest. Ano man ang operations mo will affect price. Kasi supplier ka, di ba? So kung masyado kang malaki, you flood the market with your product, maapektuhan ang price kasi mag-shift yung supply curve. All right. So if all firms are essentially equal size, so ito nga yung explanation sa second bullet. They're small not because of their physical operations, but because their operations are not large enough to individually affect the equilibrium price through the aggregate supply function. Okay, so each of these individual small firms faces a horizontal demand curve because they are what we call, ito na naman, may nakita na naman akong mali. They are what we call price takers, as price takers. No? So, yeah, that's essentially what we mean by small. So, pag sinabing horizontal demand curve, because every firm essentially is facing a demand curve, 'di ba? Kasi yung ability niya to supply. Nga pag sinabing price taker siya, kasi pag demand curve, 'di ba, yung downward sloping. So, ibig sabihin, for every level of demand of the firm, the firm is willing, demand of the firm's product and the firm is willing to supply, there's a different price. Pero kapag price taker na siya, which happens when the firm is considered small, then the firm only faces one price. Kasi hindi naman siya makaka-apekto sa price at all. So price taker lang siya. So kung ano yung nasa market, yun na yung price na kanyang tatanggapin, o yun lang yung price that's relevant to the firm. All right? So as if firms are small, meaning they can't affect the price, then this is one condition of the perfectly competitive industrial organization is satisfied. So when the firm is a price taker, excuse me, the perfectly competitive firm has marginal revenue that is essentially just the price of the good. So balikan natin yung question what do you mean by what is marginal revenue? All right, what does that mean? It means the addition to revenue when the firm sells one additional good. Yung definition ng marginal. How much revenue changes, or how much does total revenue change when the firm produces or sells one additional unit? Since the firm is a price taker, if the firm, what is the, let's say the price, the price is equal to 100, diba? So, pag sinabing marginal revenue, this is P times Q eh. The price is 100. Diba? Kasi per unit yan eh. But what is Q? It's just 1. Kasi marginal revenue nga eh. So that's just 100 times 1. So the marginal revenue is equal to the price. Kaya in a perfectly competitive situation, kasi that only happens with perfect competition, kasi nga price taker yung firm. So in a perfectly competitive situation, the price is equal to the marginal revenue. Oops. Okay, so recall, and this is just the explanation. Recall that profit is just equal to total revenue minus total cost, where PQ is total revenue and C is total cost. To maximize, pi means profit, no? Ito yung symbol for profit sa economics, pi. To maximize pi, we need to have positive incremental or marginal profit for each additional unit of Q produced and sold. So what is marginal profit naman? How do we define marginal profit? Marginal profit is the addition to total profit, or how much total profit increases when the firm produces and sells one additional unit of the good. All right? So to maximize, ang objective ng firm is to maximize profit. Okay? And profit is defined to be PQ minus C. Okay, so to maximize profit, there has to be positive or incremental, or every unit that's produced and sold must contribute positively to total profit. Diba? So hindi ka magpo-produce. Is it possible to have a negative marginal profit? Yes, kapag yung cost is too high and that the additional revenue generated by the additional unit of the good it costs too much. No, the cost is higher. The additional cost is higher than the additional revenue. Okay. Oops. So this is an illustration. This is a table to illustrate what we're talking about now. This hopefully will help you understand what's going on. So in this case, on this table now, so you have, this is a, what can you tell from the table alone? What information can you use to have a clue as to what type of firm this is? This is a perfectly competitive firm. How do you know? Anyone?
Price.
How do we know?
Marginal revenue po. Yung PNMR po same.
That's right. Well, that also, kung wala man yung marginal revenue column, this will give you a clue. Oops, dali clear. This one. Kasi price taker siya, so there's only one price. All right. So, and of course, the second clue is this one. Kasi nga here, price is equal to marginal revenue. But even if without the column on marginal revenue, you know that this is a perfectly competitive firm kasi nga there's only one price taker siya. Okay? All right. So going back to the table. So what else do we know? We know that the total cost, dito meron siyang total cost table. All right? So ito yon for 0. Bakit 0 yung quantity pero total cost is 9? Ano ibig sabihin nun? Anyone?
May fixed cost?
May fixed cost, correct. So ibig sabihin, kapag quantity is 0, your total cost is 9, then your fixed cost must be 9. Kasi, di ba, total cost is equal to total fixed cost plus total variable cost. But total variable cost depends on the quantity. Is 0 yon, so 0 to. Pero meron ka pang fixed cost. In this case, the fixed cost is 9. So you know, no, from the table, that the fixed cost is 9. All right. Total revenue is 0. Di walang revenue. well, but marginal revenue, well, theoretically, ang marginal revenue niya is 5. Pero actually, hindi siya 5 kasi walang binenta. So, merong adjustment sa table na to. Na ito. All right. Kasi wala namang nabenta. Okay, so going back to the table, don't mind yung first marginal revenue. Okay, so when I say first, the 0 quantity marginal revenue. Okay, so ano pa ba ang ano natin dito makukuha natin? Ang marginal, what do you call this? For the first unit, the marginal revenue is still 5 kasi nga price taker siya. First unit, second unit, lahat naman yan all the way down, 5 lang yan kasi price taker siya. But the marginal cost would be the total cost for 1 minus the total cost for 0. So it's 10 minus 9, so 1. Alright? So ito yung, for marginal cost, this was derived from this table. Alright, so this is one. Yeah.
Yung price po ba na tinutukoy, selling price?
Yeah, the equilibrium, well, selling in the sense, ito na equilibrium price kasi ganito yon. Yung sa market, downward sloping ang demand curve, upward sloping ang supply curve sa market. No? Kasi lahat ng firms yon. So mag-intersect yon. That would be the price. That's the market price. Ngayon, as an individual firm, ang question is what is the price that a perfectly competitive firm faces? Since perfectly competitive siya, it will only follow the market price. So kumbaga parang I illustrate, no, sandali, tanggalin natin to. Parang isipin nyo, tingnan nyo ilalim ha, kasi ito lang yung space ko eh. Ito ay aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Ito is 5. Alright? So itong 5 na to, this individual firm naman, alright? Individual firm kasi ang tanong, ano ang price, ano ang kanyang supply, ano ang price na susundin niya? 5. Kasi ano siya, price taker siya eh. So kung ano yung sinabi sa market, hindi siya nagde-deviate doon. So 5. Ito 'yon.
Thank you po. Okay po.
Okay, sige. Alright, so from this table, so makakalculate na rin natin yung total profit at makakalculate na rin natin yung marginal profit. Diba? Okay, now remember, as long as the marginal profit is positive, it means that your total profit is rising. Kasi contribution yan to total profit, di ba? So, sige, tandaan nyo mabuti itong table na to. Tingnan nyo mabuti itong table. Nasa book naman ito. So, kung sakaling you need to refer back to it, nasa libro to. Okay, so makikita nyo na at some point, the marginal, pag sinabing, even though the total profit is still positive, the marginal profit may be negative na, which means na lumiliit na yung total profit. Okay? Alright, so how do you calculate yung marginal profit? Well, kukunin mo yung difference nitong dalawa. Alright? Etc. Etc. Makukuha mo yung marginal profit. Okay? Alright. So, next. Alright. So, profit max is at the point where P is equal to MR and MR is equal to MC. So in this case, it's kasi it's perfectly competitive. The general condition talaga for profit, the general profit maximizing condition is MR is equal to MC. Kaya lang, in a only in a perfectly competitive situation, since P is equal to MR, then the profit maximizing condition is P is equal to MC. Only in perfectly competitive situation. Okay? Okay. So, next. So, in order for us to be assured that the level of production, kasi ang question dyan is, okay, so now that you know that what the least cost rule is, the question is, what would be the output, the level of output that will bring in the maximum profit? Hindi ba infinite dapat? Kasi habang nagtataas ka ng number of production, nadadagdagan ng profit mo. Kung babalikan natin yung table, apparently hindi. Kasi pagka umabot ka na dun sa quantity is equal to 7, your total profit is now negative 10. So, bakit? Kasi the cost is higher. The marginal cost of production is now bigger than the marginal revenue or the marginal price. I'm sorry, the price, no, in this case. So it's not true that in order to maximize profit, you should have infinite production. There's only one level of production that will give you highest profit. Okay, at ang sabi doon, it is at the point wherein the price or marginal, marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. Oops. Here. Marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. That would be somewhere where the marginal revenue is equal. Ito yung marginal revenue natin. Ito yung marginal cost. So dapat 5 is equal to marginal cost somewhere here. Gitna. Somewhere here. No? Dito sa gitna na to. Your marginal cost, kasi rising yung marginal cost mo. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then may na-omit yung 5. Somewhere in between dito. So somewhere between quantity, how much quantity? Maybe 4.5. Around 4.5 is the profit maximizing quantity. All right. So at that point, your total profit would be at its maximum. Okay. So somewhere in between that. So somewhere here. Siguro 1.5. Baka that's their total ano na. Your total profit is at its maximum. So pag tiningnan mo yung table, consistent yon. All right? Okay. Questions at this point? Wala pa? Okay. So, observation. A firm may be operating at a loss, but it might still be better for the firm to continue to produce and operate even at a loss if it can generate enough revenue to pay for its fixed costs. So, as long as this condition is satisfied, MR is equal to MC, all right? And it may turn out that it's a negative profit. It might be that it's still the best position kasi it's not true na if you're losing, you should automatically shut down. Why? Kasi may babayaran kang fixed cost. Remember, fixed cost does not depend on the quantity you produce. So pag nag-shutdown ka, meron ka pang positive fixed cost. And if the fixed cost is large, then that's going to be your loss. Can you minimize your loss? Yes, by producing maybe at a small quantity. Kasi you'll still earn enough revenue to pay for maybe enough to pay for the variable cost and a portion of the fixed cost. Diba? So it might be better for a firm to continue to produce a small amount instead of shutting down completely. There'll be zero production. There's no production. Because at zero production, the fixed cost may be 100. Let's say an example, the fixed cost is 100. But so when the firm shuts down, it would have to pay 100 pesos worth of fixed cost. Now, if it continues to produce, it might generate a revenue equal to, let's say, 150, and the variable cost is 40. No, let's say so the variable cost is 40, the fixed cost is 100, the revenue is 150. So ibig sabihin the loss hindi positive pa pala yan. The loss might be let's say pala the revenue is 130 lang. And the variable cost is let's say 130 lang yung what do you call this, yung 130 yung revenue. So 130 yung revenue. Alright? Pero yung cost niya ay let's say ang total cost niya ay let's say 150. So loss yan, di ba? Pero ang loss niya is only at this point 130 minus 150. Ang loss niya is only 20. Di ba? So ang loss nito 20. Pero pag nag-shutdown siya, anong loss niya? Kung ang fixed cost niya ay 100, so ang loss niya would be negative 100. So mas mabuti pang mag-produce siya ng a small amount kasi ang loss niya is only negative 20 versus negative 100. Okay? All right. So to minimizing loss is still a strategy. All right. So zero loss isn't necessarily possible. It may not be possible. And shutdown isn't necessarily the best option if you have a very high fixed cost. Okay. All right. So an example of this this situation, which apparently I have an example pala, which is better. Fixed cost is 55,000, variable cost is 20,000, total cost is therefore 75,000. But your revenue is only 60,000, then the total loss is 15,000. If the firm shuts down, it will still have to pay for the fixed cost of 55,000 peso. Therefore, it is better for the firm to continue to operate because its loss will only be 15,000 as opposed to 55,000, di ba? So ang option natin dito would be either the loss is going to be either 15,000 peso loss or 55,000 loss. Ano mas maganda sa dalawa? Siyempre, yung 15,000. Ito yung better option, yung 15,000 loss lang versus 55,000. And so the firm's superior strategy is to produce a small amount in order to minimize its loss, to pay for some of its fixed costs so that the loss is minimized. Okay. So this brings us to the question, if that's the case, when is it better for the firm to shut down? Or meaning for the firm to have zero production? Now, what is a shutdown point? It is the critically low market price wherein the revenue is equal to the variable cost. Now, remember that the revenue depends on the price of the good. Diba? Kasi yun naman ang point doon. The revenue, if the price of the good increases, then the total revenue will rise, given the same amount of quantity. So, ang question, and then normally the reason that firms start to lose money is because the price is going down too much or too fast sometimes. Kasi they're paying for diba? They're paying for production, they're paying for inputs, etc., for labor capital. So every time the price increases, the profit of the firm rises, assuming that the cost of production is the same. Oh, well, it will not be the same. But if the cost of production is rising slower than the rise in revenue, diba? But sometimes, or in many cases, the price goes down. Okay pa yon, as long as the price is high enough to pay for all the costs. Ibig sabihin, the price is high enough to generate enough revenue to pay for the total costs. Now, if the price starts to decline to a point wherein the firm loses, it still might be better for the firm to continue to operate at a low level as long as the price still generates enough revenue to pay for both the fixed cost and the total variable cost. All right. The shutdown point is the point wherein the market price is so low that the revenue is just equal to the variable cost. All right, wala nang babayaran sa fixed cost. This is the point wherein the firm shuts down. Okay, graphically, this is how we find the shutdown point. Ito yung break-even point na tinatawag. Pansinin nyo kung anong curves ang nandito. You have the marginal cost curve. How was this derived? By looking at the table again, the table that we had earlier, and calculating the additional cost when you increase production by 1. Then you have the average cost curve, and then the average variable cost. Also have actually, the difference between the two is the fixed cost, the average fixed cost. All right, so how do you calculate the average cost? Is simply total cost divided by Q. So hindi mahirap i-calculate yan. Average variable cost is simply the average variable, average variable cost is simply total variable cost divided by Q. And what is average fixed cost? This is just total fixed cost, total fixed cost divided by Q. Okay? So when you analyze graphs, it is the average cost that's relevant. Why? Because you can easily calculate the average cost from this. What is the average cost at this point? Itong binibulugan ko na to. All right. That's the average? The average cost is this much. This one, di ba? Let's say this is 50. All right. What is the quantity at that cost? Let's say this is 60. Okay. So the average the average cost is 50. What is total cost? But the total cost is simply average cost times Q from this formula. Diba? So ibig sabihin, kaya nyong i-calculate yung total cost when you have information about the average cost by multiplying it by the quantity. So in this case, the total cost will be 50 times 60. This is 300. 3,000. This is your total cost. Okay? All right. So, now, dito sa graph, anong mapapansin nyo? The shutdown point is where the price, kasi every point here is a price, di ba? Every point on this vertical line is both a price. The price represents yung different revenues, no? the different revenues that can be generated for every level of production. Kasi your total revenue is equal to price times quantity. So if this is the price, all right, if that's the price, and what is the total revenue at, let's say, 20? It is simply 10 times 20. So every price or every line on the vertical line, the vertical part of this graph represents revenue. All right, or total. Every price represents a marginal revenue, so contribution to total revenue. So ang shutdown point is, excuse me, the point wherein the price, this one, this is the shutdown point. Oops. The price is this, representing quantity this much. All right, so the shutdown point is the point wherein the price generates enough revenue to pay for only the variable cost. It can't pay for any portion of the fixed cost. The price is low enough that it can only pay for the variable cost. It can't pay for any portion of the fixed cost. All right. So anything lower than that price, any price lower than the shutdown price will generate a loss that's bigger than the fixed cost. So ibig sabihin hindi na niya kaya, it's just enough to pay for just the fixed cost. So mula fixed, as long as the price is enough to cover for the fixed cost, zero, okay pa yon. Pero lower than that, hindi na. Kasi the loss will be bigger na. Kasi may variable cost ka pa eh. Plus the fixed cost. Malaki ng losses mo pagka ganun. Ibig sabihin, you're not even able to pay for the variable cost. So negative ka na doon. Tapos hindi po mabayaran yung fixed cost na negative din yon. So mas malaking negative yon kesa dun sa the price is just enough to pay for the fixed cost. Now, break-even point naman is this portion. The price is low enough, but still high enough, no, to pay for the total cost. So break even. So it's enough. The price is enough or is high enough to generate revenues that it can pay for both the total fixed cost and the total variable cost. All right. So, sabi natin, it is still better for the firm to continue to operate even if it's at a loss, as long as the price is enough to pay for the fixed cost. So, ibig sabihin, any price between this and this is okay. Diba? Any price that's between this shutdown point and the break-even point is okay. How about price higher than the break-even point? Is that still good? And the answer is yes or no. Hindi siya trick question. Anyone? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Kasi the price is high. Ibig sabihin, it can generate enough revenue to more than cover or more than pay for the total cost. Kasi di ba, a price for instance here is enough, it will generate enough revenue to completely pay for the average cost, etc. Alright? So okay yon. So ibig sabihin, as far as the firm is concerned, any price that's higher than the shutdown point, pataas, is good. Any price that's lower than this shutdown point is bad. Alright? So, ang pinaka-threshold ng firm when it comes to production is price that's equal to shutdown, pataas. At the very least, no shutdown. So therefore, given that, alright, this portion of the, kasi di ba, price is equal to MC. So every point, dapat dito, bawat price equal to MC yan, hanggang dyan. Di ba? Yan ang relevant to the firm. So ibig sabihin, price is equal to MC, the firm will produce this much. Puro yan ang kanyang mga options. Q1, Q2, Q3, di ba? So, ibig sabihin, from this portion up to that portion is the supply curve. Okay? So that's how we derive the supply curve. So where does the supply curve start? From the shutdown point pataas. Kasi this portion, these prices, all of these prices, tong mga prices na yan, hindi yan relevant to the firm kasi that's too low. Hindi niya mako-cover yung fixed cost man lang. Alright? So, ang supply curve, when you want to derive the supply curve, you must have the marginal cost curve. Then ito, a rule of thumb, the marginal cost curve will hit the average variable cost curve and the average cost curves at the lowest portion of those two curves. So graphically, alam nyo kung saan equal ang MC sa AVC at saka sa AC. It is at the lowest point of these two curves. Okay? Questions? All right. So, in conclusion, the marginal curve, the MC curve will hit the AC and the AVC curves at the lowest points of these two curves. The part of the marginal cost curve from the shutdown point and above the shutdown point is the individual supply curve. And then to determine the industry supply curve, you simply sum all of the individual supply curves together. Okay. So now that we know how to derive the short and the long run supply curves, let's make a distinction between what we call a short run supply curve and a long run supply curve. You'll notice this is an empirical. No? Pag sinabing empirical, ibig sabihin, this is not based on theory, but based actually based on observation, and theory only tries to explain why that is. Okay, so in this case, the short run supply curve, as you can see, is inelastic or relatively inelastic. It may not be completely inelastic, but it may be relatively inelastic to the long run supply curve. Okay, so now why? Why would the short run supply curve be relatively inelastic in the long run? Sandali, nagre-ring yung phone. Okay, and this is because there will be, because of what? Why is the short run supply curve more inelastic? Pag sinabing inelastic, it's not, it doesn't respond to prices quickly. Diba? So ang logic is as long as when the price increases, the firm wants to supply more. Pero dito sa table na to, dito sa graph na to, sinasabing mas mabagal ang response ng supplier kapag short run than in the long run. Bakit? Kasi in the short run, at least one variable is fixed. So ibig sabihin, hindi agad-agad nakaka-react ang supplier, ang producer, when the price increases. Kasi pag nag-increase ng price, sasabihin ng supplier, ay, ang ganda ng presyo, increasean ko yung capacity, increasean ko yung production ko. Kaya lang, since it will take time for the firm to purchase equipment, to buy inputs, perhaps increase the size of the factory. So yung response niya to a price increase, kasi gusto niya magdagdag ng di ba, ng production kasi mataas ang presyo, hindi siya agad maka-respond kasi the time is short enough. There is at least one input that's fixed. Sabihin, hindi agad-agad pwedeng lakihan. In the long run though, wala nang fixed input kasi the time is long enough that you can actually expand everything. Pwede mong lakihan yung size ng factory, pwede kang bumili ng mas maraming equipment, pwede ka pang magdagdag ng inputs, etc. So, mas elastic ang long run supply curve kesa sa short run supply curve kasi sa long run supply curve, the time is long enough that there's enough or sufficient time to change change capacity, buy more equipment, etc. Okay, so short run supply is less elastic than the long run supply. In the long run, there will be zero economic profit and business will earn normal return. Ito yung medyo tricky for many people kasi ano ibig sabihin na zero economic profit? Bakit magkakaroon ng zero economic profit? Bakit pa nag-engage kung hindi? Ang ibig lang sabihin nito, kasi in the long run kasi, when profit is positive, it becomes an enticement for other suppliers to enter the market kasi nakikita lang ay kumikita yung industry. So every time a new supplier enters the market, supply rises, di ba? When supply rises, what happens to equilibrium price? It goes down, di ba? So as long as there is positive profit to be made, there will be new entrants to the industry. And every time that happens, the price will go down. Now, darating yung point na the price is just high enough to earn zero profit. But does that mean na pagka zero profit, bakit ka pa mag-e-effort? Zero profit naman. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Kasi remember, dahil sa economics, we pay for everything. Diba? So yung time nung owner, pati yung return on investment sa kanya, yung kanyang investments, may may return on investments, nabayaran na lahat yon. Yung tinatawag na profit na lang doon is over and above all of those costs, pati yung mga return on investments. Alright, iba ang definition ng profit sa economics kaysa sa pangkaraniwang definition ng profit. Dito, kapag pagka may positive long run profit ka, ang tawag nun actually is super profit. Kasi bayad yung as an investor, bayad ka na may return on investment na as yung opportunity cost mo as as the one yung ikaw yung may-ari nung labor, bayad ka na rin, di ba? Kasi may opportunity cost tayo. Tapos yung capital na ininvest mo doon, bayad na din yun kasi ang binabayaran doon yung opportunity cost of your capital. Dahil ibig sabihin dapat ang ibabayad, ang return on capital should be return, meaning yung earnings ng capital na pinasok mo doon sa kumpanya should be yung opportunity cost nung capital na yun kung ginamit sa ibang industry. All right, so in the long run there will be zero economic profit. and business will earn what we call normal return on their investments kasi opportunity cost payad na lahat. All right? So, it's 11 o'clock na pala. Next time, we're going to talk about the different types of supply curves. We're about to end chapter 8 na. And we're just going to talk about sa susunod na lesson natin or sa susunod na discussion natin. We'll look at the different types of supply curves, and then we're going to talk about what we call Pareto optimality and competitive equilibrium as the basis for yung act behavior ng firms. And then we're also going to look at the role of government in an industry. Okay, so that will be chapter 8. And then after that, we'll begin chapter 9, which is, what is chapter 9 all about? Chapter 9 is going to be about, basahin nyo na rin yung chapter 9. Sandali, tinitingnan ko lang before I let you go. Chapter 9 is going to be about imperfect competition. Okay? All right. So read up, and if you have any other questions, you can ask them next time. Titingnan ko rin sa chat box baka merong ibang questions ngayon. Oops. So I can settle that before I let you go. Okay, fixed price. It's just an answer. Okay, so kung wala na kayong tanong, have a good discussion session today. And I'll see you all on Tuesday. Okay, please magbasa kayo sa the remaining part of chapter 8 and beginning part of chapter 9. Sige, maraming salamat. Have a good weekend.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you din. Salamat. Bye, Ralph. Bye, Patricia. Bye, Eddie.
Sige po.
Bye, sir.
Sige.
Sir.
Bye.